Hello, and a huge welcome to educators joining us from all over the world. So, in this masterclass, we're going to go beyond the usual tips and tricks. And look, this isn't really about control. It's about how we, as educators, can architect the kind of environment where profound learning can truly flourish. You know, we've all been there. This reminds me of a story from instructional coach Craig Simmons about his first year teaching. He had this meticulously planned sticker chart, right? And one day, a student just looks at him and says, "Mr. Simmons, nobody cares about those stickers." And that just hits home, doesn't it? That feeling when a strategy you thought was brilliant just falls completely flat. So that moment, that failure, it really brings up the big question for all of us. If those simple formulas, those pre-packaged systems just don't work, then what actually builds authority in the classroom? What's the real foundation of a classroom that's well-managed, engaged, and genuinely productive? Okay, let's dive into this. Here's the plan for our session today. First, we'll talk about that sticker chart problem. Then we'll get into the different forms of authority. After that, we'll look at management versus organization, see how to become architects of our own classrooms, and finally, tie it all together with the most important principle, that authority really begins with caring. Okay, so first up, let's really unpack that sticker chart problem. Look, the problem wasn't the stickers themselves, right? It was the reliance on this kind of external, one-size-fits-all formula. Because tactics like that, they usually just treat the symptoms, not the real root cause. And they totally fail to build that intrinsic motivation and genuine respect that are the absolute hallmarks of real, authentic authority. Okay, so with that in mind, let's move on to a much more powerful way of thinking about authority. You see, it's not just some personality trait you either have or you don't. It's way more complex than that. And to break it down, we're actually going to lean on some foundational work from the sociologist Dennis Wrong. And this is absolutely key. Authority isn't some fixed thing. It's something we have to consciously build and grow by pulling from a few different sources. And once you understand what these sources are, well, that's the first real step to mastering them in your own practice. So, the first type is what we call legitimate authority. Think of this as your baseline. It's the authority you have simply because of your job title. You are the teacher. It's the reason students might ply it down on the very first day of school. But as we all know, that's just a starting point, right? It's nowhere near enough to sustain a really great learning environment all year long. Next up, we have competent authority. Now, this is the authority you earn. This comes directly from your expertise, your passion for your subject, and your skill as a teacher. When your students see that you really know your stuff, that you can create these incredible learning experiences, their respect for you just grows and grows. They trust you because they believe you know what you're doing. And that brings us to the third type, personal authority. And this is really the heart of it all. This is the authority you build through connection, through empathy, through just genuinely caring about your students. With this, students listen to you not because they have to, but because they respect you and like you as a person. And let me tell you, this is by far the most powerful and the most lasting form of authority you can have. So just take a second and think about your own classroom. Which of these forms do you lean on the most? Is it balanced? You know, if you rely only on being the teacher, it can feel kind of authoritarian. If you only rely on being their friend, things can get messy. The most effective teachers, they find a way to blend all three together to create a classroom culture that's both strong and resilient. All right, so now that we have a handle on where our authority comes from, let's talk about the two main areas where we actually use it. And we're going to draw a really important distinction here between two things that are related, but are definitely not the same: classroom management and classroom organization. And what's so great about seeing it this way is how clear it makes things. See, management, that's all about what you do to influence student behavior directly. Organization, on the other hand, is about how you design the environment, the physical space, the routines, the systems. So one is about influencing the students, and the other is about influencing the world they're in. Okay, so we have this great framework now. Let's get practical. Thinking of ourselves as architects of our classrooms, how do we actually take these big ideas and turn them into things we can do on Monday morning? All right, first things first, and this is a big one that comes straight from the research. Focusing on punishment is often a really bad idea. Sure, it might stop a behavior right then and there, but in the long run, it can create so much hostility and resentment. It completely undermines that personal authority we've been talking about. Plus, it doesn't even teach the right behavior, it just penalizes the wrong one. So instead of punishment,
think about these alternatives. Every single one of these shifts the focus away from just penalizing a kid and toward learning and restoration. Things like guidance and counseling, that shows you care. Assigning a leadership role, that builds responsibility. See, these aren't punishments, they're teaching moments. They're designed to bring a student back into the community.
Now, the other side of that coin, avoiding bad punishment, is getting really good at effective reinforcement. It's that old saying, right? We have to stop just catching students being bad and start strategically catching them doing things right. And there's a science to it. You have to be immediate, so they make the connection. You have to recognize improvement, not just perfection. That's huge for a growth mindset. And always pair any reward with specific verbal praise. That's what builds that personal connection.
Okay, we've covered a lot. We've talked about frameworks, we've talked about tactics, but now I want to boil it all down to the one single thing that holds it all together, the real foundation for this whole architecture of authority. You know, when you really look at what works in the classroom, you find that the best strategies aren't just things you do. They're really an expression of who you are as a teacher. They come from a consistent and authentic way of being, an ethos. And that brings us to the final, most important takeaway of all. There's this great insight from research out of Wichita State University that just cuts right to the heart of it. Look, your legitimate authority, that's just part of the job description. Your competent authority, you earn that with your skill. But your personal authority, the one that really matters, the one that lasts, it all grows from one single thing, genuinely caring about your students, as learners and as people. So I want to leave you with one final question to think about. Your authority is always teaching something. Every rule, every interaction, the way your room is set up, it all sends these subtle messages. It's like a hidden curriculum about what you really believe is important. So what is your authority teaching? Is it teaching compliance? Or is it teaching critical thinking? Is it teaching silence? Or is it teaching engagement? Really think about that, because whatever that lesson is, that's what your students are going to remember long after they've forgotten the day's lesson.